On your table are evaluation forms. It's important that we hear your thoughts about our speakers and the conference today. To introduce our next guest, please welcome Chris Schneider, who is the Alzheimer's Foundation of America Director of Communications. Chris?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we're very fortunate. We have two very knowledgeable, fantastic speakers from the Oklahoma City area who are here to talk to you today. I'd like to introduce them right now. We have Tracy Speck-Neeson. She's from the law firm of Holmes, and Neeson, and she's a member of the National Elder Law Foundation. And we have Lori Stansberry, owner of Senior Helpers, Greater Oklahoma City. So just to tell you a little bit about the background of both of our speakers, Tracy has been an integral part of legal representation in successful Medicaid cases and elder law matters since 1993. She's been a certified elder law attorney for 20 years, been named an Oklahoma super lawyer as one of the state's top attorneys. Lori is the CEO of Senior Helpers, Greater Oklahoma City. She has a passion for delivering quality in-home senior care and for making a positive impact on the lives of those she serves. Lori previously managed human resources at a regional hospital and a long-term care facility and was a management consultant. Lori is very actively involved in a number of civic and volunteer groups, including Rotary 29, the Paseo Arts Association, Harding Fine Arts Academy Foundation, and PEO. So Tracy and Lori are going to provide tips for long-term care planning. They're going to discuss different long-term care options and their benefits, along with details that everyone should know when planning their long-term care strategies. They're also going to teach you how to navigate legal, financial, health, and housing issues that may come up in your planning efforts. So please join me in welcoming Tracy and Lori.
Divide and conquer on this topic. It's a huge topic. You still can't hear me? Okay, good. This is a big topic. So we're going to just barely touch the surface. There's so much I would love for you guys to know from the legal side of things when you're dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's. But since we have such a little bit of time, I thought I would just hit the highlights of what I would really want to know if I were in somebody's shoes dealing with an Alzheimer's family member. So on your table you have these purple sheets, just a little outline of what we're going to talk about today. If you have a pen, grab it. I'll probably say some things that you want to jot down. The first thing, I want to talk to you a lot about funding and Medicaid and Medicare. But before we get there, I want you to know about powers of attorney. It's just a very common topic for anybody who's dealing with a mental decline. Like, how does my family manage my finances, manage my health care when I'm not able to speak for myself? So those documents are called powers of attorney. And it's not like I have powers of attorney and my husband, my kids, some of my other family members are on my powers of attorney. I think everybody should have powers of attorney. I mean, my kids, I have one who's 18, one who's 19. They have powers of attorney. You would be surprised how many people that I have in my office, somebody, a young person has a wreck or something, and then they have some type of mental problem. And we need those powers of attorney to avoid guardianship. So these are the things. Maybe you already have powers of attorney. I want to tell you, just highlight 3 or 4 things that the questions you should be asking when you're looking at powers of attorney. There are a variety of powers of attorney. The first one that you should be thinking about is a financial power of attorney. This is somebody who's going to help you manage your finances. This can be multiple people. You don't have to just pick one. It can be all of your kids. It doesn't have to be just one of your kids. You can have 3 or 4 people on there. They can each have the power to do something. It's pretty convenient. You might have one kid that lives in Oklahoma and one kid that lives in California. The one in Oklahoma may go on vacation and need the one from California to come help take care of mom for a while. Everybody can be on the power of attorney. So it's no problem, and I love it when I've got multiple people on powers of attorney. Durable or not, this is just a legal term of art. Is the power of attorney durable? That means that it survives your incapacity. If it's not durable, the minute you become incapacitated, so basically the person you name as agent on your power of attorney can do anything that you can do. If you become incapacitated and you can no longer make decisions for yourself, they can no longer make decisions for you either, because the power of attorney is not durable. So you want to look for that word durable on your power of attorney. Now, you can get powers of attorney forms online, and I know that. I much prefer you go to a lawyer and talk out all the steps and stages and the provisions that you might need in your power of attorney, because to me, it's not just a form. There are a lot of decisions that need to go into whether or not you have Medicaid provisions in your power of attorney. Are you going to allow gifting to your agents? If you just have a form you pull out from online, for example, let's throw an example. Maybe they need to do gifting for Medicaid planning. You've pulled some form from online. Normally, an agent under a power of attorney cannot gift, especially cannot gift to themselves, because it's self-dealing. So you need provisions in your power of attorney that lets them do these extraordinary things that you may not be thinking about. You want those in there. The springing or current. So some powers of attorney are current. Like mine right now, my kids could actually take those documents down to the bank and take care of my banking things. They could take my powers of attorney and go take care of things financially for me. If I'm out of the country, they can go take care of something for me. They're current. The definition of a springing power of attorney means that once you become disabled, for most of them will say, once my doctor and another doctor write letters saying that I'm incapacitated, then my powers of attorney come into effect and my agents can act for me. I don't like that. Nobody wants to have to drag mom or dad down to the doctor and get them determined to be, mentally unable to take care of their own affairs. Nobody wants to try to go get a second doctor letter. So I prefer that everything is current, not springing. Hopefully, whoever you're appointing on these powers of attorney, you trust enough to manage your finances and you're not worried about that, and you would just make them currently effective. So we've talked about financial powers of attorney. There are also all sorts of medical powers of attorney. Oklahoma has a state form for a healthcare power of attorney. It was designed by the legislature and it's available online. It's not the best, and from my perspective, something's better than nothing. So if that's what you have to deal with, then print it off, get it signed. But basically, it is so limited. It deals with when you are basically in a vegetative state, if you have a terminal disease, if you want food or hydration during those times. It's very limited. But it also has a section that you can appoint a healthcare proxy, somebody to speak for you. And it also has a point on there to do anatomical gifts. And my opinion on anatomical gifts is this: just put on your documents that you're going to let your family decide. You never know when something's going to happen, and maybe a grandchild needs something that would be helpful. I mean, there's just so many things that can come up with anatomical gifts. Just let your family decide. Just delegate that decision-making post-death to see what might be possible for them. Oklahoma also has an advanced directive for mental health treatment so that you can waive some of the requirements under Oklahoma law for going ahead and letting your family get some mental health treatment for you. We also have a very extensive healthcare power of attorney that's not the state form, but it goes into all. Okay, so you can get the records, you can get the hospital records, you can make decisions. And when you think about the financial power of attorney, my kids could do something for me now. Medical power of attorney, don't worry. If you can talk to your doctors and you can make the decisions, the doctors are going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to the agent on the power of attorney. The agent on the power of attorney is for when you can't communicate with your doctors. You can't make those decisions for yourself. So don't worry about that. Oklahoma also, every state allows DNRs, do not resuscitate orders, and whether or not you're ready to sign that depends on your situation, of course. The reason why I want everybody to have powers of attorney, because if you have good ones, hopefully they will avoid guardianship. And I've talked to some people in the room back at the table, and we've talked about situations where there's guardianships. And I don't like guardianships because they're expensive, and it means that your loved one who you're asking to be put under guardianship gets served with papers saying you're no longer mentally able to take care of your affairs, you need to be under guardianship. This can be very frustrating. It can divide families. It's not always a healthy thing. And you've got annual reports, you've got the court involved now in making decisions about that I feel like should be family decisions, not court decisions. I don't think a judge should always be involved in situations like that. So that's why I don't like guardianships. Sometimes you need them, and you just have to go there and deal with it. Okay, now Lori and I are going to leave some time at the end for you guys to ask questions. The second thing that I really want to talk to you guys about is Medicare, Medicaid, and I could throw in VA there. I don't have time to discuss all the things about VA. But when we're talking about long-term care, we're talking about needing assistance, caring for individuals, either in-home or in a nursing home. Nursing homes cost over $5,000 in Oklahoma now per month. That's a lot. And so there is a state and federal combined program, Medicaid, that will help with that. Many people think Medicare, which is the insurance-based program. I see a lot of gray hair in the room, so all the over 65 people. Medicare, it's great. It's an insurance-based program. Medicaid is a welfare-based program. But don't let the word welfare scare you, because there are a lot of helps and things that you don't have to be totally impoverished like you think of welfare to be able to be eligible for some Medicaid programs to help pay for care. Either Oklahoma has an at-home program, and for nursing home care as well. There are actually 2/3 of people in nursing homes that their care is paid for by Medicaid. It's just, there's not a lot of people out there that can afford $5,000 a month over and over and over every month, unless you've maybe invested in a long-term care insurance policy. Lori's going to address that a little bit as well. Many of you, I've even talked to some people back at the table that tell me, oh, I have a revocable trust, and everything's all set up. When you need Medicaid, this is just a warning so that when you go to a lawyer to talk about Medicaid and you say, oh, I have this trust, and the lawyer says that does no good. What the issue is revocable trusts are great for estate planning. And estate planning is when you're on the road to life and you live in Oklahoma and you're moving toward life to sunny California, and that's where the end of life's going to be. So along the way, you're all happy and you're using your revocable trust and you're taking your kids along with you and you show them the Grand Canyon, and then you decide, oh, I'm retired, I'm going to spend some of my retirement dollars in Las Vegas. And then you keep going and you get to California and, you're aging and it's so beautiful. There's deserts, and then you can see the snow-capped mountains, and then life terminates. That is great for revocable living trusts. That's awesome. Your kids will be so thankful. Whoever your beneficiaries are, they'll say, thank you for doing this revocable living trust. Medicaid is different. Medicaid does not like revocable living trusts. Medicaid says, well, we were going this way, now we need to stop. And now we need to turn around and we need to go to Washington, D.C. and get some tax dollars to help pay for funding our nursing home care, our at-home care. And it is a total about-face from doing revocable trusts. It is totally different. You're going in a different direction, and probably those sort of things are going to be undone. Your regular estate planning that you got might be undone when you go get Medicaid planning. Now, Medicaid is so complicated. Courts complain every time they have to decide a Medicaid issue. They complain that it's more complicated. The Medicaid rules that Congress has in place are more complicated than the IRS code, if you can believe that. And it is. It is so crazy complicated. But I want you to know just a few things, and that is that it is a welfare-based program. So there are financial requirements and limits and income limits. Now, the financial requirement is you have to have less than $2,000. Now, don't jump to conclusions that, oh, I don't have less than $2,000, I'll never be eligible for Medicaid, because that's where Medicaid planning comes into place with a lawyer who knows what they're doing, who can really help you. This $2,000 is countable assets. There are a lot of things that are not countable, like you can have a car, you can have a funeral, you can have cemetery plots. If you're married, your spouse can still live in the home, and there's asset protections for your spouse as well, assets that they get to keep. So the $2,000 is only countable resources. Now, the husband and wife issue is where you get into a whole lot of planning opportunities. Because if you go to DHS, they basically are going to say you have this married couple, they don't care if you have a prenuptial agreement. They don't care whose name's on an account. What's his is hers, what's hers is his. They look at the entire ball of wax. They look at all the countable assets. They basically divide them in half and say, well, the one in the nursing home has to spend down to their $2,000, and once that's done, then that person's eligible for Medicaid, and the one at home gets to keep the other half. Everybody with me? Was that too complicated? Do you want me to say it again? So basically, you're looking at whatever's countable. So the house, of course, is going to be exempt for the one at home, so long as it's not in a trust, the revocable trust I was talking about a minute ago. It's going to be exempt for the one that stays home, and half the assets are going to be exempt for the one that stays home within some limits. There's a house value limit. There's an asset value limit. So too much to really talk about here. I just want to make you aware of those sort of things. Basically what happened was in about 1988, Congress decided that people were getting divorced so that one spouse, the spouse that was in the nursing home, could be eligible for Medicaid, and the one at home could still have assets to live. And they thought, this is really, really bad public policy, and it was. So they made some spousal protection policy that lets the spouse at home keep some assets, which is really good. VA has similar rules. They have asset limits, income limits. There's eligibility for a VA nursing home. Even like my grandma has VA benefits because my grandpa, she's a widow of a veteran, and she's getting some VA benefits right now. There's too many things to go into dealing with all of that to really touch when we have such a brief amount of time. The other big thing about Medicaid is, since it's a welfare program, since it's tax dollars, they don't want you to be able to say, oh, I am just going to give all my assets to my kids so that I only have $2,000, and then I'll be eligible for Medicaid. So there is a gifting look-back period. They look back in your records for 5 years to see if you've made any gifts to kids, anyone. And when I say they look back, I'm talking about I have applications that I turn into DHS that are more than 1,000 pages because they want every brokerage record for the past 5 years. every bank account record for the past 5 years. You got CDs rolling over, they want every CD record for the past 5 years. Doing a Medicaid application has become extremely complicated because of this 5-year look back. So if you've made gifts within the past 5 years, they actually are going to come up at the time you need Medicaid, and they're going to penalize you. You can do planning before that 5-year mark hits and save all the assets that you want, so long as you are willing to divest yourself of the assets. So you might say, well, I'll just give my house to my son, put it in his name, and that way I don't own my house in case I ever need Medicaid. Bad idea? Good idea. Maybe, maybe not. What if your son has a car wreck and is underinsured and gets sued for $1 million because somebody was a quadriplegic after this car wreck? What happens with your house? It's his asset. What happens if you put your bank account in your son's name so that it's out of your name and son gets a divorce? What happens? It's part of his assets. Good idea? Bad idea. I could rattle off lots and lots of scenarios that I've seen over the years. So what we recommend is, if you can get in before 5 years, that revocable trust that many of you have probably been to seminars, revocable living trust, there is an irrevocable trust. One that you actually give up control to whoever the trustee is, put your assets in this trust. If you can make it, you don't have access to it at that point. If it's with your kids can access it. You can't access it. They can access it. They might be able to take care of things for you. You have to be super duper careful with it. But so long as you can get assets out before that 5-year mark, then you don't report that pre-5-year gifting to DHS when you go in and do a Medicaid application. So there are a lot of things we can do to help with that Medicaid eligibility. And let's see, what else do I need to tell you? And then the last thing, real quickly, is if you go to a DHS office and apply for Medicaid, they're going to tell you this is how it is, spend down, buy a funeral, spend mom's money on the nursing home until it's spent down to $2,000, and then come back in and see me. If you go to an elder law attorney and say the same thing, they're going to say, let's strategize. It's kind of like going to an accountant and saying, how can we save some money on taxes? And the accountant's like, ding, 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 I have some ideas. And so same thing with an elder law attorney. There are so many loopholes in the law. Now, Oklahoma has some of these things in their state policy. Some of them are only in the federal law, and you have to do appeals through DHS to actually get the advantages of these loopholes. And notice I didn't put anything underneath the loopholes. Like, I didn't give you pointers underneath the loopholes, because what happens is I feel like we do these loopholes and then DHS finds out about it, and then they write policy to get rid of our loopholes. And so I stopped putting things in materials about loopholes. But there are so many interesting things that are in the federal law. Like, if your child lives in your house with you for 2 years before you go into a nursing home, then that gifting exception that the 5-year gifting look back that I was talking about, there's an exception for that. So they live there for 2 years, then you need to go into the nursing home. They've been taking care of you. You can deed their house to you, and it's exempt. The 5-year look back doesn't apply. There are things about if you have a child who's disabled. Maybe you have a child on Social Security disability because they have fibromyalgia or something. There are exemptions for gifts to a disabled child. There are exemptions for disabled. You can do trusts for disabled grandchildren. I've done that before. There are all sorts of different loopholes of things that you can do, and a lot of them have to do with spouses. There are spousal annuities that we can implement. I've had all the stars and facts align, and some people walk into my office married couple, and they have such low income that I say, you know, DHS says you have to divide half and half. Federal law says you do not. Spouse at home, you get to keep 100% of everything, all the assets here. So there are so many things that if you are faced with needing to pay for nursing home care, before you go to DHS, go talk to somebody who's knowledgeable about these things so that they can really help you get powers of attorney in place and talk to you about how to potentially get Medicaid planning, get VA planning done. And it's always wonderful also when you have long-term care insurance. That really helps as well. Not everybody can afford the premiums. So Lori's going to talk for a few minutes about home care and long-term care, those sort of things.
So thank you very much. And I always worry in situations like this about, you know, how much people in the room already know and probably boring you to death. But I'm going to run through basically kind of the situations and options, what people have and options in terms of housing options. I'm going to start there. But just to set the stage, by 2030, 65 and over population will double to 9 million. That will be over 20% of the population in the United States. 75 and older will be the fastest aging group by 2020. And there's going to be an unprecedented amount of individuals who are going to live to 100 or over. So what does that mean? That means that in many instances, we are outliving our assets. 50% of those people will be widowed or divorced or never married. And we're going to need, on average, about 200,000 more care workers by 2024. So where does Alzheimer's dementia come into all of this? There are approximately 5.8 million Americans living with Alzheimer's dementia, and this includes 5.6 million 65 and over. But there's also at least 200,000 people that have Alzheimer's that are under the age of 65, so early onset Alzheimer's. 1 in 10 people age 65 and older have Alzheimer's dementia. In Oklahoma, more than 64,000 Oklahomans live with Alzheimer's disease. Over 223,000 friends and family are right now providing care. And by 2025, they are projected to have 76,000 Oklahomans diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. So somebody in the U.S. is developing Alzheimer's and dementia every 66 seconds. In terms of options for what you can look for in terms of housing options as somebody ages through the continuum, there's a lot of different types of long-term care. I'm going to run through the most well-known. First is independent living. And independent living is basically for those active seniors who really don't want to have to be responsible for having their own home anymore. So it's basically usually apartment-style communities. There's a hotel feel. It's for active individuals. And it's great for people that are able to live on their own but enjoy shared dining experiences and, again, don't have to take care of their own home or apartment. Now, there are no state regulations in an independent living. Second is going to be assisted living. So assisted living is an option for those who basically need help with activities of daily living, or what people like to call ADLs. And are ADLs a familiar acronym to everybody in the room? Okay, so basically what it is it's basically tasks of daily living, which would be dressing, bathing, eating, managing medications, pretty much everything that your mom used to do for you when you were little. They also provide assisted apartment-style living, scaled-down kitchens, and they sometimes can offer roommate options, and they are regulated by the state. Now, part of the conditions for living in an assisted living, depending on where you are, is that you're able to safely evacuate in case of fire or any kind of other natural disaster. And that's important to remember in terms of eligibilities of being able to stay in an assisted living facility. Next, there's board and care homes. Those are sort of self-explanatory, but they're smaller typically, and usually more one-on-one attention. Usually there's about 6 individuals to a home. and it's more of a home versus a hotel. But again, it's going to help with the activities of daily living as well as the independent activities of daily living. Next, in terms of the continuum, is going to be memory care. And memory care is a specialized type of senior care designed to meet those with Alzheimer's or other kind of cognitive impairment. Typically, there is a lot more emphasis on safety and security. And as disease progresses, then the level in care and the assistance that somebody receives will also progress. We move into then what we call continuing care continuums, retirement communities, CCRCs. CCRCs are entered at the independent living stage and then typically are a buy-in situation. So for those individuals who do not have long-term care insurance, it can be an option because you will set the stage for you to start out in independent care, move to assisted living, then into memory care or nursing home care through the stages of your life. So it's also particularly useful for some of our clients who are married who each require different levels of care. And the life communities are the same thing. Basically, though, you have to pass medical and health requirements to be able to get into some of these life care communities. If somebody is staying home, options include adult daycare, which typically will involve door-to-door transportation, and its cost will depend on the individual circumstances of the individuals who are participating. There's also a type of care called respite care, and respite care will provide, just as it says, short-term breaks for families or other unpaid caregivers, and it can also be assistance during recovery from a procedure. Then we move to home health. Home health and home care are sometimes confused. But senior home health care is a government-regulated, skilled care that's provided at home to somebody who is an elderly disabled or chronically ill. And it's physical care, such as nursing, physical therapy, speech therapy. It's typically ordered for a specific period of time, predicated on your ability to improve through the in-home care services, and it's typically covered by Medicare with physician's orders. We also have veterans benefits, and there are 3 different programs there, as well as some specialized home health programs. And again, those are all regulated by the VA, and in terms of eligibility, it's going to basically be dependent on income as well as levels of disability. So there are quite a few types of long-term care options, and trying to figure out which ones are the best for you a lot of times can also depend on payer types. So in long-term care, there is government assistance, which Tracy has gone through some of that. There's private pay, people that have saved throughout their lives to be able to pay for this. There's long-term care insurance for those of us who are lucky to have taken it out. And also lucky enough to have read the fine print to make sure that you know what you're actually getting in your long-term care policy. And a lot of times you don't know until you actually trigger it. And then veterans benefits. Long-term care benefits are particularly important to a lot of our clients. And what happens is that a lot of people don't want to touch them until they think they actually need them. A typical long-term care trigger time is between 82 and 85 ages, and clients are usually on service for 2 to 3 years. So just so you know. There's a lot of different options that one can look at in terms of navigating all of this. We recommend, obviously, talking to an elder care attorney such as Tracy. And we also recommend that there are independent navigators that can help you, that know everything there is to know about all these different facilities and communities in Oklahoma, know how to pay for them, and their services are entirely free. So there's a couple that are particularly good, and I'd be happy to share their names if you wanted to. But here's some things I think that really are important with Alzheimer's dementia, which is really why we're here. So for navigating this particular disease spectrum, here's some advice that we've learned over time. You need to know what you're dealing with. in terms of the diagnosis and in terms of other associated conditions, because as our previous speaker shared with us, there's very frequently other chronic conditions that go along with Alzheimer's and dementia. Please get a baseline assessment by an expert in dementia. Please have regular monitoring by medical and behavioral specialists. Have family meetings early on so that you can establish what the basic goals and the ground rules are. What type of care do you want over time? What can you afford? And then establish a common plan for the type of care and the roles that each family member can play. Assign a point person to coordinate daily care and decision making. It's very difficult when siblings all get together and have different ideas as to what's required and how to actually get it executed. Commit as a family to the burden of care, to share it, and to actually subjugate your agendas to the overall care of your loved one. And last, very important to pre-agree ethical, financial, and responsibility-based issues that can be amplified under an Alzheimer's dementia and loss of parental authority. 90% of adults in the United States wish to age in place and with dignity, but there's a lot of barriers to that. A lot of barriers include people saying, I don't want, even though that care is necessary, they don't want help in the house, it's too expensive, they don't know where to find it, they don't need any help. So please get help early. If your loved one has Alzheimer's or dementia, please don't wait. It's important to have a plan. It's important to be able to have resources that you can call on. It's important that you as caregivers and as a family stay healthy, are good to yourselves. It's okay to spend your children's inheritance. It's okay to give your children the understanding that you have put together your wishes, that you've disseminated them so that when the time comes, your loved ones can take care of you the way you wished, not the way that they think you wanted to be taken care of. And so we all in the room are the first sandwich generation that's expected to take care of adult children, potentially, as well as parents. And have that plan in place before there's a crisis or an emergency. Set up that outside care. Understand what your options are so that your family doesn't get that call at 2 in the morning saying, gee, this is what's happening, what are we going to do? So know the signs of Alzheimer's dementia, which can show up and can just start developing 20 years before you actually see the disease. Modify your house if you're going to stay at home. Modify your house before there's an urgent need. And kind of on a housekeeping issue, try hard to get all that clutter removed in your house. It's there's lots of benefits for doing that. So anyway, it's kind of it. It's a very quick overview. But the most important thing, I think, is to have a really good understanding of what you're dealing with, understand that it is uncharted territory, go to experts, don't go it alone. There are outside agencies such as ours, Senior Helpers. We're one of the corporate sponsors of the tour, and we have 2 disease specialties. One is Alzheimer's dementia, the other is Parkinson's. But when you're looking for caregivers, look for those caregivers that are licensed and bonded and insured. It's very easy to think about looking for a private caregiver, but understand that private caregiver, you're responsible in many instances for all of their taxes. You're responsible for their workers' comp. You're responsible to make sure that if they aren't available to come, that you have somebody else set up. So you're managing their schedules. Be very careful in who you trust in very vulnerable situations. But we're all in this together. So Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
On the issue of long-term care, my husband and I both have long-term care policies.
Okay, good.
We both have long-term care policies. I am in very good shape. My husband, his sister, two sisters, both are diagnosed with Alzheimer's. They both have long-term care. In order for me to remain healthy, I need to divest myself of some things so that I have time for myself. And I'm wondering, can we go into a good facility where I am independent and I can still access some of his long-term care provisions? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I'm probably not the right person to answer that question. Typically, when we're talking to our clients, we're talking about individual long-term care policies. What I can share with you, though, is that communities such as CCRCs, which is why a lot of people like to look at those. So because basically spouses will have differing needs for care.
Right.
I'm not trying to dodge your question. I know it sounds like I am.
No.
The short answer is I think that's an individual situation, and I just can't give you that answer.
Okay. I didn't know if there was any legal involvement.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I wouldn't worry about legal things. And there are the CCRCs, Continuum of Care residential centers, and they do have, I've got spouses in an independent living apartment, and then I've got one spouse in the nursing home. They're on the same grounds, and the healthy spouse just gets up and walks over to the nursing home every day, has meals with the one in the nursing home, and goes back at the end of the day. And they live that way.
But do they live have you had a situation where they can both live in the same apartment,
Yes.
and the one who needs care, you can access their long-term care policy that will help pay for the independent living apartment?
Yes, you just have to check with that facility to see who they allow to come in. Some of them have their own agencies that they limit, and they say you have to use these agencies to come in. But yes, you're going to find a place to be that will allow something for you to be able to access his long-term care to pay in that environment. It'll work.
For bank accounts, federal savings and loans, or whatever their name are, if the bank goes under, each account is insured for some amount. For long-term care insurance, if my wife and I have been paying into them for 25 years because we made a decision long ago, if that insurance company gets in financial trouble, is there any kind of a backup, or are we out of luck?
That's a question for the Oklahoma Insurance Commissioner. We've had some life insurance companies go under and they roll out and pay, like another company will take them over, but I haven't heard of one going under on the long-term care insurance. I'm sure there are protections in place somehow through the Insurance Commission.
What is the effect of Social Security or a retirement pension type income on the determination of eligibility for Medicare or some of the other benefits?
Well, don't forget, Medicare and Medicaid, you said the word Medicare. Medicare is an insurance-based program. So people over 65, people who have been disabled for 29 months and on Social Security disability, those are the people that are on Medicare. It does not pay for long-term care. It doesn't pay for the nursing home. It does pay, and I say that, there's a little bit of skilled care that comes along with Medicare, but as far as long-term care, custodial care in a nursing home, it doesn't pay for it. So if you're looking at It's easier for me to talk single people instead of married people, but a single person, so a single person has less than $2,000 of assets, needs to live in a nursing home, and has $1,550 of Social Security every month. They get to keep $50, and that's like their personal allowance. It's getting ready to go up to $75. So you get $50. The rest, you get to pay your Medicare supplement, you get to pay your Medicare premium, and the rest of it is a copay to the nursing home. Medicaid only pays the difference, but basically all your income goes to the nursing home except for $50, getting ready to be $75, that you get to keep if you're a single person. If you're married, it's a whole different ball of wax. The one at home gets to keep about $3,000, a little more, of the couple's income. Yep. So the one in the nursing home may not have any copay, because maybe the one at home only has $600 of Social Security, so they get all of the one from the nursing home, all of their income, so that they can still maintain the household and live. It's those spousal impoverishment laws that I was talking about.
Pension or whatever does not affect your eligibility to have the Medicaid, but all that money has to go to the government to pay for your stuff. Is that right?
Yes. There are more exceptions and things I could go into. If you hit certain caps, you have to use a Medicaid income trust to get eligible. There are like caps on caps. So if you have $5,000 a month, you're not going to be eligible for Medicaid, because Medicaid says you have $5,000 a month, you can just private pay. So there are caps and different things up there, but for the most part, yes.
You said $5,000 a month for nursing home. How does that compare with the memory units cost-wise?
Nursing home is going to be slightly more than a memory care. Something to remember is that each individual facility or community, they will probably give you a base rate, a base monthly rate, but understand that there are quite a few add-ons that come on top of that. Excuse me, I've got a cold. But memory care is going to be a little bit less.
A little bit.
Typically, I'll say typically.
But does it increase as you become more dependent?
It can. Again, it's going to depend. It's going to depend on where you are. But yes,
I'm seeing these signs, which is sadly humorous, but it says "Move In Special."
right. And there are quite a few of those. And again, what I would share with you is that first of all, remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Two, that communities, not because they want to be disingenuous, but don't always say as things progress what your costs are going to be. So it's important to understand the right questions to ask. It's also important to understand that people like us, home care agencies, providing that one-on-one support, can certainly come in to an assisted living, to an independent living, also memory care, to basically keep you compliant with being able to stay there instead of having to move on to another facility.
I know we're running out of time. Lori and I will be back at the tables in the back, and so you can continue to ask us questions, and we've got some free resources back there that you can also take with you.
Join me in thanking Tracy and Lori. Thank you so much. So as she mentioned, they will be here, and we also have Timberwood Assisted Living in the back as well. These are services right here in your own community. But what's so critically important that you've heard today is you can't go alone. You can't do this alone. You can't go on your journey alone. That's why we're so proud to have our exhibitors here today. As mentioned, Senior Helpers has been a national partner of ours, and we're very grateful, and the National Elder Law Foundation has been a partner as well. Take advantage of them being here. Take advantage of their time and the services that they offered, because, as I said, and it's been noted so many times today, you can't go on this journey alone. This concludes our conference. I want to thank all of you for being here. It's so critically important with the initiatives we have in our mission to educate individuals on the services that are available, to educate them, to let them know that it's okay to make that phone call. Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. You know, as mentioned here before, you know, we've helped families whose loved ones have had it in their 30s. It's not a normal part of aging, and you're never too young to learn what it's like to be a caregiver. So thank you so much. God bless all of you, and thank you very much for your support.